The program is about to begin. We are rehearsing the opening announcement. The last details are being added. In the studio, last directions from the producer. The producer is speaking.
1 minute to go. You'll go ahead on a green light then, Pat? Right.
One minute to go. We can hear now the music of the program before. The producer hands over to the actors and to the engineers. Less than a minute to go now. All the work in the writing and the rehearsing of the program, all now coming to a head, all boiling down to this one supreme moment. Half a minute to go. And the producer, suspended in space as it were, seems to see the whole as it ought to be. For a second, his vision extends even beyond, to the audience, to 1 million wireless sets at the other end, 1 million separate audiences. Are they ready? Are they listening? Here, the house is empty. There, the set is switched off. But here, license number 865432, Mrs. Moss. Is she listening?
Turn up the wireless, Mrs. Moss. Yes, dear, it is chilly tonight. Let's turn the wireless up a bit.
Spanien und
Sitzung des IG.
Welcome from me, Terry Wogan. Now, unless you've been down a hole in the ground or up the Hindu Kush for the last 6 months, it can't have escaped your notice that the BBC is celebrating its 75th birthday. Now, before you reach for the off switch, get away, with a strangled cry of, "Oh no, another slice of self-congratulation." Stay your hand. Trust me. I'm a doctor. What I have here is dynamite. Lord Reith will do handsprings in his grave. Those ex-chairman, DGs and controllers still alive. And you sometimes detect the flickering of an eyelid in some cases. Quivering like aspens even as we speak. For we have the papers. The rust-encrusted gates of the BBC's written archives at Caversham near Reading have been flung wide. We've blown the dust and cobwebs of 75 years away. And here, for your ears only, we present Auntie's Secret Past.
Can I do you now, sir?
The Queen is still sitting in King Edward's chair. The princes and princesses, the peers and peeresses, prepare to put on their coronets and caps, and the kings of arms their crowns. The Archbishop, assisted by other bishops, comes from the altar. The Dean of Westminster brings the crown.
Look at you, look at you, look at you, look at you. A triumph of technological engineering. A work of art. They can keep their Sistine chapels. Give me the inside of a wireless set any day.
What's the recipe today, Jim?
Journey into space. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
This is the BBC Home Service.
Here is a special bulletin read by John Snag.
The BBC, your dear old auntie, was born on the 18th of October 1922, and you've been supporting her ever since. On the 1st of November 1922, the first broadcast receiving licence was introduced. 10 shillings. 10 bob. 50p. I'm not sure how many écus. And on the 14th of that same month, November, the first daily radio programme was broadcast from 2LO London. I understand a boy soprano called Jimmy Young sung quite nicely on that occasion. And the following day, the first broadcasts came from Birmingham and Manchester. Ah, the sheer wonder of it all. And then in December, the BBC appointed a general manager. All was changed utterly. Reith was a towering Scotsman of lowering brow and thunderous mien. John Charles Walsham were his first names. Not that anybody would dare call him by those. His memos were initialed JCW. And what JCW said went.
Chartwell, Westerham, Kent, 29th of December, 1929. Dear Sir John, I am very glad you liked my appeal on behalf of the blind. I am about to make a public offer to the BBC for £100 out of my own pocket for the right to speak for half an hour on politics. Dear Mr. Churchill, thank you for your letter of the 29th. With regard to the offer which you are to make for the right to broadcast for half an hour on politics, you may not know of the following clause in the BBC licence from the Postmaster General. The corporation shall not, without the consent in writing of the Postmaster General, receive money or any valuable consideration from any person in respect of the transmission of messages by means of the stations or any of them. How ashamed you will all be in a few years for having muzzled the broadcast. Exactly the same thing happened in the old days when they were afraid of freedom of speech and writing. But the obstructionists have gained no fame in history. How absurd to have a complete democracy and all access to them denied. This is going to be a bad year. Yours sincerely, Winston S. Churchill. Do you really think we should copy the American plan of allowing what you realize so fully to be the immense potentialities of broadcasting to be available on a cash basis, irrespective of any consideration of content or balance? Yours sincerely, John Reith.
I would say to the House, as I said to those who have joined the government, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
JCW was made Sir John Reith in 1927. By then, the BBC had moved to Savoy Hill, from whence the great Stuart Hibbard would present music programmes, introduce talks, and read the news until programmes ended at 10:30. He'd then walk to the nearby Savoy Hotel to announce the Carol Gibson's dance band numbers, and then chase down the Strand to Charing Cross to catch the last train back to Kent. all in a dinner jacket. They don't know they're born these days, do they? Now, in an attempt to give Hibbard a longer run for his money, the BBC moved in 1932 to a bijou little place made of 2,630,000 blocks of Portland stone. They called it Broadcasting House. They still do. And worse. Staff didn't like it then, and they don't like it now. Sir John Reith noticed a certain unrest among the lower orders. Time to inspire the troops.
Diary, 4th of May, 1932. Yesterday was my last day in Savoy Hill. It has been getting rather depressing as so few of us have been left, so that on the whole I have little regret at leaving it, although naturally feel that it was something of an occasion. I packed the little things in my room and bade it an affectionate farewell. It has been the scene of an enormous amount of work, and I suppose considerable achievement. It really has a kind of romantic interest.
Well, Oliver, I suppose this will be about the last time you'll be pulling down that old iron gate of yours for me. Yes, sir. It really is the head of Savoy Hill. Still, here goes. Mind your head, sir. Good night, Watchman. Good night, sir. The old building. Good night, sir. Good luck to you all, sir.
Arrived at the new office, 9:30, and met by the control board in the entrance hall. At the same moment, the two flags were broken outside, the Jack and our own house flag. I thought my room was very nice indeed. There were telegrams from Muriel and Mother, and on my table a gold key from Tudsbury, which I much appreciated. My first visitor from outside was unfortunately an American, Morris, who has a stunt international radio forum idea. I did not care for him. Carpentail and Asbridge had come to my room with me, and the latter had explained how to work the telephones. Lunched with Blackwood and two of his colleagues with Murray at the Carlton. They gave me a fountain pen in a stand, which I thought very nice of them indeed. At 2:45 there was a staff meeting to which I had not been looking forward. However, it went quite well. They gave me something of a reception when I went in. Admiral Carpendale spoke for about half an hour, and then I for about a quarter of an hour. They were very appreciative, and I understood later that I had done what they required. The staff looked very well in the hall, and it was easy to speak in.
Now, if there's anybody in this room who regrets leaving Savoy Hill and who had a melancholy feeling on the last day there, I suppose it should be me, as I was the first one to go into it, and actually it was I who found the place. But I have no regret at all. I have an affection for the place, but it was a scene of great labor and some achievement on the part of those of us who have moved in here. But I don't regret the past, because regretting the past is a great mistake. I look forward, and nothing but look forward, and I ask you all to look forward too with me to greater achievements and to happier days.
And so, a scant 10 years on, from the first stumbling words at 2LO, the great god Reith decreed that there would be a capsule, a time capsule, in which would be housed all manner of artifacts and paraphernalia, the flotsam and jetsam of the time, a cornucopia of all that was best in British life, and more particularly broadcasting, so that mayhap some passing alien or hominid of the far-distant future, stumbling upon the ruins of our once great civilization, could come upon it, stagger back in astonishment, and wonder at the glory and grandeur that was the BBC.
From the civil engineer to the Director General. Some weeks ago, when we were lunching, you said you would like to have a few interesting documents, etc., deposited within one of the stones of the building. The architect accordingly is arranging for one stone of the main entrance to be formed with a void to receive the sealed tin containing the items that you decide to deposit. I should be glad if you would authorise me to obtain at the corporation's expense a tin 12 inches by 6 inches by 4 inches to receive the documents, and if you would give the necessary instructions for the articles and papers of interest to be collected.
From G. Valmeyer and Watson Hart, architects, 30th of July 1930, to M.T. Tudsbury, Esquire, civil engineer. Broadcasting House, foundation stone. Many thanks for your letter of July the 11th. I'm making the necessary arrangements with the builders and will let you know when the time arrives for the box to be built into its permanent home. Yours very truly, G. Valmeyer.
Documents to be placed in the foundation stone of Broadcasting House, 20th of March, 1931.
Original agreement between Mr. R.B. Solomon and BBC.
Joint report of architect and civil engineers dated 3rd of July, 1928, with preliminary plans.
Building superstructure specification dated January the 7th, 1930.
Director General's evidence at beginning of Crawford Committee.
Director General's evidence at end of Crawford Committee.
Chairman's speech at annual general meeting of the company, 8th of July, 1926.
Parliamentary leaflet.
Daventry opening, official programme.
Brookman's Park booklet. The London Twin Wave Broadcasting Station.
First copy of Radio Times.
First copy of World Radio, Radio Supplement.
First copy of The Listener.
Current copy of Radio Times.
Current copy of World Radio.
Current copy of The Listener.
Copy of BBC Handbook, 1928.
Copy of BBC Handbook, 1929.
Copy of BBC Handbook, 1930.
Pamphlet, Major General James Wolfe.
Oscillation pamphlet.
The Saveloy, number 1.
The Heterodyne, number 4. 16th of July, 1930. Dear Mr. Valmeyer, thank you for your letter of the 13th of July. I'm afraid that the box, 12 inches by 6 inches by 4 inches, will be somewhat small for all the junk that we propose to deposit in it.
And now a song all about the very best people at Broadcasting House. This is called We're Frightfully BBC.
We are perfectly pucker. We represent town. Sent up to Magdalen and later sent down.
Fellows of standing with people with crests. We've just had our colours tattooed on our chests. Rhubarb, tomato, and rhubarb.
We're really too utterly utter, as bored as two blighters could be.
We always step over the gutter and carry a racket or she.
We hear J.H. Thomas, we like the old horse.
Oh, yes.
But call him J. Thomas with pangs of remorse.
'Cause we know that the H is silent, of course.
We're frightfully BBC.
Happy landing.
One of the more rewarding aspects of public service broadcasting is the number of honest listeners and viewers who sit by their sets waiting to be offended. Then follows an irate phone call or terse letter, which the BBC, cleaving closely to the responsibilities laid down by its charter, always notes or answers. Which is why there are millions of that ilk in the written archive, which is the source of this programme. In the early days, one lady complained about the BBC's effrontery in broadcasting to her while she was in the bath. Public decency and good taste. These considerations were always well to the forefront of Reed's massive mind. The quickest way to get the elbow from the BBC was to get a divorce, or fail to pay a licence fee. Sir John kept as keen an eye on the bawbees as he did on the morality of his flock. Ironical, then, that such an almighty fuss should be kicked up over the crowning glory of the new broadcasting house. The statue by Eric Gill of a 10-feet-high Prospero sending a slim and graceful 7-feet-high aerial out into the world. All in the best possible taste and perfectly proportioned. Well, yes, but what about Ariel's proportions?
Daily Herald, 23rd of March, 1933. Statues at BBC discussed in Commons. Immoral complaints amaze the sculptor. Dainty Ariel, whom Shakespeare created to lie in a cowslip's bell and live merrily, is getting rather a hard deal these days on his draughty perch outside Broadcasting House in Portland Place, London. Maidens are said to blush and youth to pass disparaging remarks regarding the statues of Prospero and Ariel above the main entrance to Broadcasting House. Mr. G.G. Mitchison, MP for St. Pancras, who lives opposite the BBC headquarters, even raised the matter in the House of Commons yesterday.
Will my good friend, the Right Honourable Home Secretary, instruct the police to compel the Directorate of the British Broadcasting Corporation to remove immediately the statue recently placed over the front entrance of Broadcasting House in Portland Place in London as being objectionable to public morals and decency?
No, sir.
Is it the opinion of the Right Honourable Gentleman that there is here no offence against public decency?
I might quote the words of Mr. Gladstone, who had to answer a similar question. I am not officially the arbiter of either taste or morals, and I have no control over the decorations of private buildings unless they violate the law. Were it otherwise, I should see no reason to interfere.
Evening News. Those BBC statues by the man who made them, from our special correspondent. Mr. Gill roars with laughter.
To think people should think them improper.
Mr. Gill dropped his sculptor's chisel and rocked with laughter. He held his sides in a vain attempt to stifle it, and tears of joy rolled down his cheeks.
Oh, it's really too funny for words. I suppose I ought to feel offended and talk about art with a big A, but it's just too absurd. After all, why blame me in any case? Even if I deliberately carved an indecent statue, the BBC wouldn't have put it up. And...
He spoke confidentially with a trace of pride.
They like Ariel. Just look at this.
From a deep file, Mr. Gill produced his original orders from the BBC committee which decided on the statue. There, in black and white, was the instruction:
Ariel should be nude. I'm only the servant of the BBC, and if a statue is passed under the responsibility of Sir John Reith and other directors, it must be all right. Prospero wears the simplest garment possible, like the alb of a priest. It looks like a nightgown with a cord around the middle. As for Ariel, the chief thing about him is that he's entirely free from conventions and restrictions. There's simply no question about it. Ariel had to be nude. Anyway, the fuss isn't worrying me one little bit. But it does make a jolly good laugh.
Extraordinary, isn't it, how insecurity and commoner garden envy raise their ugly head. As we've seen, Auntie could never be accused of not reacting to press or public opinion. On the contrary, it's always had an almost monastic penchant for self-flagellation. Who can easily forget those appalling programmes of a few years ago when the BBC opened its heart and its books to the great British public and required its chairman and director-generals to quail piteously in front of the cameras? The result was predictable. The public ignored the grovelling display, and the print media leapt upon it like ravening wolves. Let it not be thought either that Auntie just trots out the programme and hopes for the best. Not likely. It's a bear garden. Everybody's got their sixpenny worth of opinion. It goes back to the good old Savoy Hill days, when a piece of paper would be passed around for every dog and divil's opinion on a programme. Like a game of consequences. Today, unfortunate producers have the skin flayed from their backs at what's called the Programme Review Board, a weekly meeting that makes the Inquisition seem like a thé dansant.
Memo from head of the Light Programme. Just to remind you to remind Mr. Jackson that we don't open Housewife's Choice with the words, "Good morning, girls."
I have the impression that there have been rather a lot of would-be humorous time checks. References to how difficult it is to tell the time I always get it wrong in Housewife's Choice recently. Can we ask our compares to give the time briefly and accurately and get on with the programme? There was a bad plot this morning when George Elric played a Fred Astaire record which he had previously announced as by Bing Crosby. When I came to inquire how this had happened, I was told that there is no preliminary run-through for this programme. I can't really believe this, and I'd be grateful if you'd look into it, please.
Mr. Collins, a very bad slip indeed. I've given strict instruction that there is to be no scarping of the run-through.
Is there any truth in the attached story from Advertisers Weekly, March the 18th, 1943? In the Housewife's Choice BBC programme on Monday, the announcer read a request from a listener for the title of a record played in an earlier programme. The announcer gave the name of the tune and also named the orchestra, but he explained that he was not allowed to give the make of the record, but added,
If you think of a man and his dog, you will get some idea.
Housewife's Choice, Saturday the 24th of May, 1947. Has this record of the Oklahoma tune really been passed for broadcasting?
I'm just a girl who can't say no. I'm in a terrible fix. I always say, come on, let's go, just when I ought to say nix. When a person tries to kiss a girl, I know she ought to give his face a smack. But as soon as someone kisses me, I somehow sort of want to kiss him back. I'm just a fool when lights are low. I can't be prissy and quaint. I ain't the type that can faint. How can I be what I ain't? I can't say no.
Announcer's log, 8th of April, 1948. I protest against the custom of Housewife's Choice disc jockeys saying goodbye and that they're now going to have a cup of coffee in the canteen. It must give the impression in factories and homes that BBC people are fairly idle, mere lounge lizards who play a few records and then hang about for the rest of the morning gossiping over a bun. It's the way they say it, as if the strain of playing records for 50 minutes had absolutely exhausted them, and now they were going for a well-earned relaxation.
La da 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 dee 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 da 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 dee 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 da 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 dee. I'll be with you all again tomorrow morning. La da dee 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 da.
In the Quondam days, everyone's opinion counted, of course, but the great wreaths could be said to carry just a tad more weight than any other. Not that he was any better a judge of a broadcaster than disgusted of Tunbridge Wells. According to that tireless chronicler of the BBC, Leonard Mile, when Wreath heard the great Richard Dimbleby's first broadcast, he phoned the studio and said he never wanted to hear Dimbleby again. And luckily for all of us, but particularly David and Jonathan, Wreath was persuaded to give the young tyro another chance. And still, the great ship of broadcasting surged on through the airwaves. Experimental television in 1932. The first female announcer, shock, horror, Sheila Barrett in 1933. King Edward VII's abdication broadcast in 36. King George VI's coronation televised in 37. The FA Cup final broadcast in 1938. And in June of that same year, that great architect of BBC public service broadcasting, Sir John Wreath, resigned. Neither he nor the BBC were ever the same again. However, there was no time for regrets nor recriminations. In September of the following year, the BBC broadcast Britain's declaration of war on Germany. Winston Churchill made his first broadcast as Prime Minister in May of 1940. In October, a bomb fell on Broadcasting House and killed 7 staff. In the nation's finest hour, the show went on. Itmar, Music While You Work, Workers' Playtime, Vera Lynn, the sweetheart of the forces. But was she too sweet to be wholesome?
Here's a new sort of recipe. Not the kind of recipe you get in Kitchen Front, but a recipe for entertainment.
This new blend of Sunday entertainment has soared into the exclusive top rank of radio shows with an audience of more than 20% of the radio public.
Listen to Vera Lynn and Fred Hartley tonight at 9:30 and hear some lucky man in the forces getting the first news that he's a father.
Dear boys, I've been working in the West End all this week and using the tubes and buses a lot. I realized how well some of the girls are doing your job while you're away. In the underground, girls shout out, "Mind the doors." At the railway station, they unload great parcels. And on the buses, they take your money and shout the stops. It's one of the sights of London to see them, cheerful and chatty, but getting on with the job. Most of the girls are married. I had a pleasant surprise when one of them, a girl on a 23 bus, recognized me. She must have seen a picture of me somewhere. She said she'll be listening in tonight, and so will her husband. This letter of mine is getting to be a sort of rendezvous, where husbands and wives, torn apart by war, can be brought together by music. On the wings of these melodies, the sentiments go from me to both of you, from you to her. Here is our song together tonight. Night and day, you are the one. Only you beneath the moon and under the sun. Whether near to me or far, it's no matter, darling, where you are. I think of you night and day.
Controller Programs, Vera Lynn, 17th of March, 1942. My own opinion is that much of the rather wild criticism of the Forces programme, which we have met lately, and in particular letters like the flabby amusement ones in the Daily Telegraph, are inspired by Sincerely Yours, Vera Lynn. A lot of people hear it, coming as it does at peak time on Sunday, and the strength of those who complain is, I think, a tribute to the ability with which she puts her sentiment across. There's no doubt whatever, of course, that the programme is solidly popular with the ordinary rank and file of the Forces. On the other hand, it doesn't do us any good to have a reputation for flabby amusement, and therefore I think we must do something constructive about the future use of Vera Lynn in these programmes. Of course, the criticism comes from older people, and if she sang Victorian ballads all the time, they would beam with pleasure and would not for a moment consider them sentimental. And then, of course, a lot of the sentiment is due to her compere material, which, incidentally, she puts over extremely well. I feel, however, that we might get away with the same sort of thing without any complaints, with some general brisking up, a change of patter, and the infusion, perhaps, of the less decayed Victorian ballad. Will those concerned please give the matter a thought?
Thanks for your memo. When Controller Programs raised this point last week, I expressed the view that the real complaint is the surfeit of sentiment. Because of the popularity of Sincerely Yours, this style has been adapted and imitated to such an extent that the public must be tired of it. Sincerely Yours began a fashion, and my remedy is that we should now start a new trend by putting on an antidote. That is, another personality program, but of the most virile kind.
Plenty of girls who sing on the wireless get letters from you boys asking for photographs. But I'm luckier. I get photographs of you boys sent in to me. Since I started singing about my man in this letter, a few dozen sweethearts and wives have proudly sent me snaps of the man in their lives. I've seen enough of you boys to know that you like your pals to think you're a bit of a heartbreaker with the girls. But women aren't like that. Once they've met the man they want, no one else counts. If you're lucky, you've got a girl like that. A girl who'll stick by you through all weathers and all your ups and downs. You'll disappoint her, you'll hurt her, you'll make a fool of her. But she'll stand by you. She'll take the kicks. She'll be proud to call you my man. Fish got to swim and birds got to fly. I got to love one man till I die.
A man-to-man programme which does for marches and straight songs what Vera Lynn has done for the Charing Cross Road product. If such a programme is successful, it would have plenty of followers, and the balance of sentiment in programmes would be adjusted.
Good night, boys. Sincerely yours, Vera Lynn. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. You have been listening to Vera Lynn's Letter from Home. With her was Fred Hartley and his music. The presentation was by Howard Thomas. Next Sunday night again at 9:30. Sincerely yours, Vera Lynn. And I will just say hello to the folks that you know. Tell them you
Nation shall speak peace unto nation, the BBC's famous motif, carved over Broadcasting House's entrance hall. But the nation itself needed to know what Auntie was up to, and in 1923, scarcely a year after the first broadcast from 2LO, the Radio Times was born. And nowadays, you can't mention the Radio Times on the air without adding the ponderous caveat, there are other listings magazines, but in 1923 there weren't. There was the one, the only.
dull care. The day is set fair, a wireless set near to bring us good cheer. In winter time or summertime, or leisure time and pleasure time, the daily times at Big Ben chimes are radio times. For Christmas time, the party time, or dinner time, or dancing time, the daily times at Big Ben chimes are radio times. Olden days had different ways, their pleasures then were fewer. Modern days will get my praise, our wireless ways are newer. A stirring time, a whirring time, a record time for father time. The daily times that Big Ben chimes are radio times.
The editor of the Radio Times from 1927 to 1933 was the legendary Erich Maschwitz, inventor of the black and white minstrel show, composer of A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square, These Foolish Things, and Good Night Vienna. In 1948, Good Night Vienna was staged at the Lewisham Hippodrome. One evening, Maschwitz went along incognito and asked the stage manager how it was doing. Came the lugubrious reply, just about as well as Goodnight Lewisham would do in Vienna. Maschwitz was one of old Auntie's best heads of light entertainment, an inventor of and a catalyst for a raft of successful program ideas, Jukebox Jury, Steptoe and Son, Dad's Army among them. Obviously, the program is the heart's blood of television and radio, and without a constant input of new ideas, new formats, new people, the BBC, with or without Lord Reith, would long since have desiccated and died. Mind you, from conception to birth, a new program can be a long and tedious process. There's a deal of heart-searching, weeks of analysis, painstaking planning.
A series for a hitherto neglected group of listeners.
A 15-minute program of story, music and action.
This is an educational and experimental venture being conducted in a country in which there are a number of highly skilled and experienced experts. This program will call for considerable inquiry and trial and consultation with the experts between now and the date of its first broadcast.
We need to settle the title. I don't know what ideas you have.
I thought we might start with the chimes of a clock giving the 3/4 hour as a signature tune, and then the words 1:45.
We recognise that most of the listeners rest after dinner, but for many of them the so-called rest consists of bouncing up and down in bed and interludes of calling, "Can I get up now, Mummy?"
There will be a short interlude of sleepy music at the end of the programme, which we hope will help them to settle down.
I'm ready. Are you? Are you sitting quite comfortably? Then I'll begin. Once upon a time, there was a little monkey He was brown and he was hairy. You could hold him quite easily in your arms. He was no bigger than that. Yes, that's how he chattered. Now, this little brown, hairy monkey lived in a hot country. The sun shone all day and every day. He was never cold.
There's little doubt that the series has been enthusiastically received.
It is astonishing that the children do not seem to have had to get used to this programme. They have at once claimed it as their own and refer to the broadcaster as Auntie Julia, Pussy Lady, or Story Lady, etc., etc.
The selection of rhymes and stories is just right.
We've been particularly struck by the frequent mention in correspondence of the absorbed quality of the children's listening, and the particular delight many of the younger children take in the nursery rhymes.
There is plenty of evidence that after the broadcast, the children go on singing the nursery rhymes, retelling the stories, for example, to father when he comes home, and asking mother to repeat them immediately, or later, at bedtime.
There are many requests for a half-hour programme arising from the children's desire for it to go on.
To sum up, we're already getting a surprisingly clear picture of the audience and would notice any new trend or deviation from what, at present, seems acceptable.
Ask a seasoned radio broadcaster the most important aspect of his arcane art, and pausing only for a sip of soothing eggnog, he'll tell you the pips. Otherwise known as the Greenwich Time Signal, God bless it.
Memorandum from R.H. White, Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company Limited, to Mr. A. Burrows, Esquire, BBC Publicity Department, 15th of November 1922. I suggest that a time signal sent out periodically from the broadcasting station would be of great value to the public. Such a signal can be transmitted by the wireless set under direct control of the Greenwich Observatory and could be transmitted exactly at each hour, or less frequently if required. I'm finding out what the cost of such a service would be.
The pips are sacrosanct, immutable, as constant as the northern star. Clean pips, the holy grail of all radio presenters. The pips must be broadcast pure and unsullied, untouched by the merest hint of reverberation. All decks are cleared for the pips. All movement ceased, all sound silenced. War, pestilence, disaster. Come what may, the pips must go on.
This is London. Stand by, we hope we'll get some Greenwich Time Signal pips. "17 hours, Greenwich Mean Time."
But apart from an innate, God-given talent for avoiding pips, what, in Auntie's staid opinion, was the mark of the good presenter? How to separate the wheat from the chaff of commentators? How to discover a latent Hibbard? A hidden Liddell? How do you snag a snag? In 1938, the director of Outside Broadcasts was asked his opinion. He wasn't slow to give it.
A pleasant voice, a quick wit, an eye for the significant, and a vocabulary with which to describe it. The species is rare. To find men, and women for that matter, in whom mastery of the spoken word is blended with a sense of expert discrimination, is the object of a perpetual task that is 90% discouragement.
In the early days of the BBC, no more than now, there was no such thing as a simple answer. On the other hand, you can't throw a stone up an empty country road these days without hitting a presenter or a commentator. Now, obviously, none of us would have passed the audition in 1938. But we try. Oh, how we try.
There are, in fact, all sorts of technical tricks which can be made available to the commentator once their virtues are recognized. The suspense interest of a piece of paper blowing the length of a football field at half-time, and whether it will or will not score a goal, or the human interest of the attractive girl in the pork pie hat with the dog at Cruft's Dog Show.
And a freaker. Got a freaker down the wicket now, not very shapely, and it's masculine. And I would think it's seen the last of its cricket for the day.
Both of them in the end out most extraordinary way.
Tragic thing about it, he knew exactly what was going to happen. He tried to step over the stumps and just flicked a bail with his right
He more or less tried to do the splits over it, and unfortunately the inner part of his thigh must have just removed the bail.
He just didn't quite get his leg over.
Anyhow, he did very well indeed, batting 131 minutes and hit 3 fours. And then we had Lewis playing extremely well, his 47 not out. Aggers do stop. And he was joined by De Freitas, who was in for 40 minutes, a useful little partnership there. They put on 35 in 40 minutes, and then he was caught by Duchamp Walsh. Lawrence, always entertaining, batting for 35. 35 minutes, hit a 4 over the wicketkeepers. Aggers, for goodness sake, stop it.
Yes, Lawrence.
Furthermore, there has been some advance in defining the function of the number 2 commentator. And though the old music hall jokes still have some substance, we have gone far towards abolishing the crosstalk between a stalling commentator and an ill-informed number 2.
The new wavelength changes on radio 2. On the medium wave, 433 and 33 altogether.
In the above notes, the would-be commentator has, for the sake only of neatness of expression, been assumed to be a man. It must, however, be remembered that for technical reasons, a woman's voice will only very rarely be at such a pitch that sustained listening can long remain a pleasure.
The first experimental television was broadcast from Broadcasting House in 1932, but by November 1936, the world's first high-definition television service was inaugurated from Alexandra Palace, and the following year, King George VI's coronation procession was televised, and the Wimbledon Tennis Championships. Technology had gathered speed and was off at a gallop. But hold hard. We barely got used to the wireless. This newfangled television gadget could cause untold problems. As it turned out, and to no one's surprise who's ever worked in the BBC, the biggest furore was not over morals, ethics, the philosophy of the new medium, or even content. No, what caused skin, hair, and memos to fly in all directions was the vexed question: what do we call a person who watches television?
The question has been raised as to what the equivalent to a listener would be called in the case of television. I do not know whether anybody has ever considered this, but it might be a good thing to get it settled as we want, before some horrible name creeps in.
BBC Internal Circulating Memo, subject television, 8th of February 1935. Televisor has points, but telephone has become phone. No street boy will say televisor. Let us cut it at once as phone to visor. Examples: a noun singular, visor. Plural, all visors are requested, etc. Verb, did you vise the derby yesterday? Advantage over derivatives of looker. Bad, did you look in the grapes last night, i.e. for a drink? Yes, Bert was there too. No, I mean, did you look in? I mean, look in at the looky. No, I only looked in, didn't have time to look in. Better, did you look in at the grapes last night? Yes, we was vising Eddie Cantor, E's prime. For the periodical, listener and visor is possible.
From the director of television to the editor of the Radio Times. I attach correspondence about the matter of television nomenclature, which we have already discussed. This does not get us much further. Personally, I think televiewer is going to be a very awkward word, and I'm still worried about the monotony of television broadcast and television broadcaster. Televisor is already earmarked. What are your views on something like sight broadcast and sight broadcaster?
I did not know that Controller A had definitely approved televiewer. Is this now official? Personally, I much prefer the simple looker. Again, I prefer visual broadcast and visual broadcaster to sight broadcast and sight broadcaster. The question arises whether it's necessary to have the prefix tel in all relevant words. I do not see why it should be.
There seem to be various alternatives and various points of view to be considered. Is it possible to have a fuller discussion before an official vocabulary is adopted?
To Advisory Committee on Spoken English, 5th of June, 1935. Dear Professor, I'm enclosing a list of the suggested alternatives to the word televiewer that have been received here from various sources. My own opinion is that none of them deserve serious consideration, and I hardly think it worthwhile summoning the subcommittee to discuss them at this stage. If, however, you feel very strongly that we should meet, perhaps you'll let me know. Yours sincerely.
Suggestions received as alternatives to televiewer. Aura looker.
Glancer.
Looker.
Looker in.
Optoviewist.
Optovisor.
Seer.
Sighter.
Teleseer.
Teleserver.
Televist.
Telobservist.
Telvor.
Viewer in.
Visionaire.
Visionist.
Visor.
Visier.
Visior.
Witnesser. You will see in due course from the minutes of yesterday's meeting of the Spoken English Committee that they have given their blessing to televiewer, and more particularly to viewer, and that they recommended that we might have a short, chatty talk introducing the word sometime.
Special announcement to be broadcast on the evenings of Sunday 4th of June and Monday 5th of June 1939. The television service is going to throw a party, or rather the BBC is going to ask a number of regular home viewers to meet in the concert hall at Broadcasting House on the afternoon of June 22nd to have tea and discuss television. It won't be possible to accommodate more than 150 of you, but we would like to know which of you would like to come along. If there are too many, we shall have to draw lots when we have your names. The date and time is Thursday, June 22nd at 4:30 p.m. We shall then try to find out your views about television and shall be glad to hear your criticisms. And now an apology to viewers. In arranging a date for our party in the concert hall at Broadcasting House on the afternoon of June 22nd, we had forgotten that the King and Queen are to return to London on that afternoon. We shall be too occupied on that day and have therefore decided to postpone the party until Monday the 26th of June, same time. We are writing to those who have already replied, explaining the position and intimating that unless we hear to the contrary, we shall take it that June 26th will be equally convenient to them. Let me repeat the new date. It is to be at Broadcasting House on Monday, June 26th at 4:30 p.m. And there's no need to write again, unless you find you cannot make this altered date.
It seems such a shame that the viewer and listener can no longer apply to take tea with the DG. I mean, it's all polls and graphs and statistics and public meetings these days. And, you know, I've no doubt that the BBC could get closer to the public over a nice cup of tea. But it's all become so big, so grand, so multi-billion, multinational, multi-channel, multi-digital, that it's hard to hear the still, small voice of the listener and the viewer anymore. That's why I hope you found this trawl through the BBC's written archives as fascinating as I have. Bridget Apps and her team have sifted meticulously through 75 years of papers, delicate carbons, beautifully typed on rattling manual typewriters. 75 years of every document, paper and memo ever written in the BBC. Long may this great broadcasting organisation remain as fussy, as careful, and as caring. Dear old Auntie. Here's to the next 75.